Hello, it's Jim Hutchins for the Jerusalem Connection Spot Report for this week. One of the questions that inevitably comes up with any of the end time scenarios that may be out there is, what is the role of the United States? There are those who see in the scriptures reference to the United States. That's not apparent to me, I must say. That's quite a stretch, as a matter of fact. But in light of current events, in light of the turmoil that the Russians are involved with in the Ukraine and where that's very likely to go, what is the role of the United States? And where could we possibly be headed with this? Edward Lucas has written an article. He says, I hope I'm wrong, but historians may look back and say this was the start of World War III. Vladimir Putin is striking at the heart of the West. We can choose to surrender any responsibility we have to protect the Ukraine and the Baltic states, namely Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, all part of NATO, incidentally. Or we can mount a last-ditch attempt to deter Russia from furthering its imperial ambitions. If we choose to resist Putin, we will risk a terrifying military escalation. I do not think it's an exaggeration to say this could bring us to the brink of a nuclear war, World War III. And at the same time, Caroline Glick writes in the Jerusalem Post, insightful once again, as she always is. She closes her article by saying, there is a direct correlation between the U.S. elite's preoccupation with social issues running the narrow solipsistic gamut from gay marriage to transgender bathrooms to a phony war against women. America's inability to recognize the growing threats to the global order or to understand why Americans should care about the world at all. And there is, similarly, a direct correlation between the growing aggression of U.S. foes and Obama's decision to slash defense spending while allowing the U.S. nuclear arsenal to become all but obsolete. America's spurned allies will take the actions they need to take to protect themselves. Some will persevere, others will likely be overrun. But with Americans across the ideological spectrum pretending that failure is success and defeat is victory, while turning their backs on the growing storm, how will America protect itself? How will America protect itself? It seems to me, if the trend lines continue as they are, America has become, for all practical purposes, a second-rate power in the world. Its exceptionalism is no longer exceptional. Now we have freedoms, we carry on life much as usual. But is that going to continue? My own sense is that what we see going on in the world today is really left the United States as an irrelevant participant. That could be an oxymoron. We're just irrelevant. Our enemies don't fear us. Our allies don't trust us. That we're moving to a period of isolation. And I must say, as much as that causes us concern, deep concern, it may be God's way. It may be God's way of somehow protecting and isolating the millions of God's people that are in this country. That we just become irrelevant to what's going on in the world. That's not to say that we would totally be bypassed as far as a third world war. I'm sure we would suffer from that to some degree, but possibly not to the degree that we would if we were a first-rate power involved in this. I'm thinking that the direction that God is leading us is one in which we will not be relevant to what's going on in the world at large. Second-rate power becoming a third-rate power, isolationist, very likely, if the trend lines continue. I'm reminded of the passage in Revelation chapter 14, verse 12. This calls for patient endurance on the part of the saints who obey God's commands and remain faithful to Jesus. Calls for patient endurance. The part of those who obey God's commands and remain faithful to Jesus. May God give us grace to do just that. Till next week, Od Ki Yavo Shiloh, or until Messiah comes, Yivareka Yahweh. God bless you and yours.